The community darkroom seems like a potential answer to that decline in real world interactions and connection.
I would really like to believe that it is. Like, I was trying to explain this to my uncle the other day, and I was like, "Yeah, I have this like grand delusional idea, and it's not really like that grand or delusional. I just want to be a place that facilitates good positive interactions and like creative growth."
Well, hey everyone. Welcome to episode 439 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. I'm your host, Matt Payne, and today's episode is all about how photography can bring people together in a hands-on, real-world way, especially in an era when so much of our creative lives happens behind screens. My guest is Lucia Rollow, the founder of the Bushwick Community Darkroom in Brooklyn, New York. What started as a personal need for darkroom access turned into a thriving analog hub that's been building community for nearly 15 years. Lucia and I talk about why film photography and darkroom work feel so social and even therapeutic, and how shared creative spaces like hers can help combat loneliness and disconnection in our digital age. Whether you're curious about analog techniques, community building, or just want a reminder of how photography can connect people, you'll love this conversation. Okay, here's my chat with Lucia Rollow. All right, Lucia Rollow, it's great to have you on the podcast. And is that a subway I hear? That sounds awesome.
Oh my God, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
No,
Thanks
that's
for
awesome.
having
It
me.
adds,
That is
it adds like a
the
little
J
bit of
train out there.
ambiance.
We're in New York City,
Right.
so
Yeah, I'm in the middle of nowhere in Colorado. So like whenever I hear cool
oh,
sounds like that, I'm
nice.
like, oh,
Different.
yeah.
Occasionally, you can hear birds too. It's kind of amazing.
Right. Yeah, no, it's funny. My son and I went on a trip to New York City last year and he really loved it. And I was like, there's so much noise.
There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise. It's
Yeah.
why I kind of love these AirPods, honestly, because you can just plug them in and not even put on anything, and they block out like 80% of the sound.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then getting on the subway is not quite so painful because we're like 4 blocks away from the subway right now. So imagine like being on the platform with that train.
Oh, yeah. It's very loud.
Yeah.
Well, Lucia, for people who aren't familiar with you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am Lucia Rollow, and I am the founder and director of the Bushwick Community Darkroom. It's a community darkroom in Brooklyn, New York, and we have public rental, we have memberships, we have classes, we have exhibits, we have film developing services. I was like, I know there's something I'm forgetting. So yeah, we kind of try and cover the whole gamut of any kind of film photography resource that you could want. If we can't provide it for you, we can hopefully connect you to the person that can.
That's awesome. I love how you just said it seems like it's obvious because like when you wrote to me originally, I was like, I have never heard of a community darkroom. Sounds so cool. And like I said, I live in the middle of nowhere. So, like it's
There
not a
are a
thing.
few scattered around the country. I don't know if there are any out in Colorado, though, actually. There might not be. There's probably
Yeah.
one in Denver, but
Right.
yeah, there's like a couple in Texas and like Ohio randomly.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah.
And is the darkroom and your photography your full-time gig?
Yep, these days actually it is. So that's
Nice.
kind of mind-boggling. Yeah, I went to grad school and I got my master's in arts and cultural management in 2015. I graduated. And so basically since then I've been doing it pretty much full time. And it's been a journey,
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
adventure.
Well, I was going to ask if you did something before that, but it sounds like photography has always kind of been your focus.
Oh yeah, for sure. I moved to New York in 2005 to go to the School of Visual Arts and study photography. And I was doing like photo editing and assisting and all that kind of stuff in school. And then I had the pleasure of graduating into the heart of the Great Recession in 2009.
Yes.
So there weren't a whole lot of jobs at that time. So I was doing some kind of random things for a few years there. I worked for the Working Families Party for a bit. I walked dogs for a couple years. And there were a bunch of years where I was doing a bunch of things at the same time, walking dogs and running the darkroom and all of that jazz. So there was a, evolution a little bit, but yeah, it's been 10 years, I guess, since I've been doing it full time now.
I was gonna say that sounds like almost every professional photographer I know, like you basically have like 12 jobs.
Right. And I still do in a lot of ways, right? Because I'm like trying to juggle all of the different departments and whatnot. Like,
yeah, for sure.
But I
So
guess
how did you originally find the passion for photography?
it's always appealed to me as like a medium. I think like it was always just like very mysterious to me as a child. Like I remember being really young and going to the MIT Museum in Cambridge. I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's where they like started doing the first like flash photos. So they would have those original flash photos in the gallery, and it all just seemed like so cool and enticing. And one of my dad's friends gave me one of those little plastic 110 cameras when I was like 4. So I started shooting pretty early. And then I got into the darkroom one summer when I was like 12 or 13. I think it was the summer after 7th grade. So whichever age that makes me then. And seeing the whole like process and just experiencing it and realizing that I could like take something and turn it into something else, basically. Like,
Yeah.
create something where there once wasn't anything, and the magic of seeing the images appear in the tray. And yeah, I guess I was just like hooked from that moment. And my high school had a really good photo department, so I like did all sorts of photography all throughout high school, and then I moved to New York to study at the School of Visual Arts, and here we are.
Yeah. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I've never ever used or seen a darkroom. I know that sounds really bad as someone not even in high school. I don't know if we had one. I wasn't into photography back then, although my first camera was like a Kodak disc camera. It had like
Oh my God.
it had these
Every
like,
so often
little,
somebody emails me asking if I can develop those, and I don't know anyone that can. That's one of the questions I do not have an answer for, actually.
yeah. And so I like what you said about like creating something out of nothing resonates, because I always remember being excited. Like I would take a bunch of pictures on camping trips with my parents, and then you'd take it to like a film developer, and they would give you back that packet of papers with your pictures in them, and it was like, what did I do? And it's it's exciting.
Right? And I think that delay sort of adds to it a little bit too, right? Because there's a little bit of like, did I do it right? Like, am I going to
Hmm.
get anything? And so then the like kind of relief of seeing a roll of film that's been correctly developed when you're like, not sure if you exposed it correctly or whatever.
All right. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well, let's talk about the community darkroom. You founded Bushwick Community Darkroom. How did that evolve from a personal need into a full-blown community hub?
That's such a good question. It was like intentional, but also organic. Um, when I started thinking about the project, I started thinking about I needed a dark room, right? It was the first time in, like a decade that I hadn't really had access to a dark room. And I don't know, I just couldn't like live with that. um, so yeah, so I started thinking about that, and then I'm not exactly sure like what like the sequence of thoughts was, but I realized after a certain point that like yes, I needed a dark room, but I didn't need it like 24/7, right? And maybe, well, and also like I had just graduated with 150 other kids that were in the photo department that were in the exact same situation as me, and also there were like at least 5 or 10 other photo programs that had just dumped another classes of people just like me into the New York City area. So
Right.
I figured out pretty quickly that I wasn't alone because I had gone to school, right?
And none of you could get jobs.
Right. And none of us could afford to go to the like kind of more formal established dark rooms that existed like in Manhattan because they were all charging $20 an hour, and I mean this was 15 years ago, so prices have gone up a lot.
Right.
But yeah, so then I kind of started talking to people and asking if they seemed like it would be a good idea. And I had also, like, the other side of that is, like, not only did I realize that, like, I wouldn't personally need it all the time, but I had always liked the sort of shared space of the dark room. Like, as someone who's like definitely like more on the introverted side of things, I don't necessarily love like being around people, right? But I like being around people and like not necessarily having to interact with them.
Gotcha.
Like, and so being in the dark room was like a nice way to get some sort of like socializing into my life, well, like also kind of having something that I was like doing so that I wasn't just in my head like thinking about how awkward I was being, right? I'm not great at parties. Like, and I think there's a good, like, I think that that's a pretty common sort of like feeling for people, is like they don't like, they like this like sort of shared space where you're working not necessarily together but alongside each other to create, you know, separate things. And then if you want to have an interaction, you can have an interaction, but you're not like obligated to. And you know that you have something in common, right? You have
Right.
a foundation. So like you have something to start a conversation about if you want to have a conversation with someone, instead
Right.
of just being like, oh hey, where are you from, what do you do for a living, are you in the industry? Like, obviously they're in the industry, they are interested in photography in some way or another, and so you have this common ground jumping off point, and you can, you know, you have something to talk about. And then if that evolves into other bigger things, then that's awesome. And if it doesn't, then like that's okay too.
That's actually something I was hoping to ask you about, because I feel like with something so hyper focused on, photography, a bunch of people who are either super hardcore enthusiasts or professionals coming to a location around a shared interest and getting their film developed or whatever, I feel like that's an environment that would be rife for collaboration and creativity and things like that. I'd be curious for you to talk a little bit about maybe some examples of where you've seen some of that come into fruition at the community darkroom.
Gosh, where people have come together and like worked on projects.
Yeah, or like something really cool comes out of like the fact that you've created this awesome
I
space for
mean,
people to be together.
one of the things that like I kind of enjoy the most about the like experience of the community is watching people's work evolve over the years.
Mm.
There are a number of people that like, because it's been going on, it's been existing for, you know, a minute now. And so there are a number of people that I met because they came into the dark room as basically like novices without much like knowledge or experience or anything at all. And they were just like, I'm into this. And watching them progress and grow and develop their eye and like their sense of composition and lighting, as well as like learning how to do the whole developing and printing and scanning and whatever side of it as well, has been, it's amazing. Because like, you know, you meet these people and they come in and they're like really enthusiastic but like kind of terrible photographers. um, but then they keep taking photos for like 5 years, and one day I like see something and I'm just like, oh, you have really like learned, you have really come a long way and like developed your craft. Not to be ridiculous and punny, but you, yeah, like you've learned a lot and you've really progressed. And like now you've gone from someone who was just an amateur to someone who is, I mean, a lot of them like work professionally, you know, shooting, whether it's, you know, fashion or portraiture or editorial or whatever. There are a surprising number of people that are still shooting film professionally. So
That's awesome. Yeah. So obviously your project for the community darkroom is rooted in the idea that analog photography can combat disconnection in our digital world. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what that looks like.
right. That's a whole thesis that I'm trying to figure out how to like write in my head, right? But no, so when I was in high school, I worked for the John Kerry campaign. And then when I got out of college, I worked for the Working Families Party. And we were trying to raise funds to fight Citizens United. And so we
Whoops.
were knocking on doors, asking people to give us money to help get money out of politics. Didn't really work so well, strangely enough. But so I've always had this sort of like need to feel like I'm having some sort of like impact, right? And like doing something that's like for the greater good or whatever.
Mm.
And when I was in college, I read Bowling Alone, and it really made an impact on me because he was talking about how when everyone got televisions, when they became ubiquitous in the 1950s or so, neighborhoods got quiet, basically, and people went inside and stopped interacting. And that was sort of the beginning of, I think, what we have seen really explode over the last 20 years since Bowling Alone was written, with the, development of social media and all that jazz. And it just turns into this complete social isolation where people are inside in front of screens and being told by the screens that they should be afraid of the people that are outside living next to them. And I don't think that's good. I don't think we should be afraid of our neighbors. I think that life is better when people can get along and collaborate and see each other as humans and not as others. And so the idea of having a space where it was you could come together with one sort of foundational shared interest and then realize that you're more alike than you may have thought, and hopefully try and rebuild some bridges of community and democracy and civil society along the way in some tiny little way, because I definitely couldn't do it on the big scale with the political work. I'm not cut out for that.
Right.
But maybe in this little community, I can make something good happen and help
No,
people.
that makes a
see.
lot of sense. It's interesting because I have a group of friends that we always try to get together every fall to do fall color photography here in Colorado, and
Oh, nice.
and we all have very diverse backgrounds, like Democrats, Republicans, middle of the road,
Yeah, God, you're
younger,
out in
older.
Colorado.
Yeah, it's very purple.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because our shared love and passion for photography and for Colorado and for fall colors, that supersedes all that stuff. And what I found is that shared passion around photography kind of opens the door for us to have more meaningful conversations that are less heated, and there's not name calling, we have respectful conversations with each other. And I think having that more community focus is what kind of opens the door for those sorts of things to happen.
Right. Instead of starting off from a place of fear and antagonism and oh my God, they're so scary, they're different. You're coming from a place of a shared interest, and that allows you to actually see each other as people. And I think that's sort of the core element of Bowling Alone, right? That's the whole title is from the idea that pre-television people were part of bowling leagues, and every weekend everybody was at the bowling alley bowling together on leagues. But now post television we bowl alone. We're not on teams, we're just out with our already pre-selected group of friends in our aisle, and there's no forced interaction, so you can sort of still maintain that siloing because you're in your self-selected group. But if you're on a league, then you're forced to interact with other people that you wouldn't necessarily know otherwise, and you have a shared project that you're working on together with a bowling league. But at least with photography, you have the shared interests that you can come back to at the end of the day.
Right. So in that,
And it's such an accessible art form too. Anyone can pick up a camera. So
right, yeah. And I guess in that vein, the community darkroom seems like a potential answer to that decline in real world interactions and connection.
I would really like to believe that it is. like I was trying to explain this to my uncle the other day, and I was like, yeah, I have this grand delusional idea, and it's not really that grand or delusional. I just want to be a place that facilitates good positive interactions and creative growth.
Yeah, I mean the word is community, right?
Right. And I mean, it's really, I hate that the name is 15 feet long for all internet purposes and email addresses, but it was really important to me to have that in the middle, because it's not my private darkroom, and it's not supposed to be. And I don't yeah, maybe someday if I ever buy a house, I'll have a private darkroom in the basement of a house. But I'm a millennial, so the likelihood of that happening is not very high.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh well.
So yeah, it's interesting. Have you had any feedback from the people that use the community darkroom around it having that sort of impact on their lives?
I know that a lot of friendships have formed and like various romantic relationships have I've seen them start and end, and
Oh gosh.
but I know that there's like a good chunk of people that like are friends with each other because they like met and bonded at the darkroom, and they hang out like on a relatively regular basis, and like sometimes they're doing like photo trips and photo journeys or whatever and like stuff, but sometimes they're just like getting brunch and hanging out, and
Yeah.
I love that, you know. I mean, it's sort of like I went to boarding school too. So I lived in a dorm from 14 to 18. And so I was with like between 20 and 30 other girls in the dorm for all of those years. And they were random people from all over the world and all sorts of backgrounds. And that's an experience that has definitely shaped me and like impacted me. And I remember like having conversations with them, like some of them, about how like, yeah, if we weren't living in the same dorm, we would never talk to each other. But like, because we're in the same dorm, we're like kind of friends, and it's nice,
Right.
and we hang out, and like, you know, we might go to a movie on a Saturday night or go to a party in the gym or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Totally.
I've seen this happen.
Yeah. I was gonna say, for me, that reminds me a lot of like my freshman year of college. Like, you're in a dorm, and like none of the people there
Right.
you know before, and by the end of the year, you're like best of friends. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit more about photography. So, what do you think is so special about analog photography and darkroom work that makes it inherently social or perhaps even therapeutic?
I don't necessarily think it's inherently social, but I think the group gang darkroom of it provides that opportunity for it being social. But I also think people love sharing photographs and like seeing
Yes.
prints and feeling prints and like having that like tactile object. And I mean, there's still really isn't anything that can compare to a nice black and white print, you know? It's just, I've gotten to the point where I think of analog and digital as just like two different mediums, you know, just two different ways of creating an image because the experience is so completely different. And to get to the therapeutic side, the like physicality of working in the dark room and just like being focused on this like thing in the tray and rocking it back and forth and watching the image come up and being in the like soft orange light with the like ventilation going, and like if you want to put on your music you can put on your music, and it's just I think one of the like most like chill environments that like could possibly exist. And I don't think I'm the only one that feels that way. I think a lot of people that work in the darkroom feel like there's a certain like meditative like experience to it because you get into a flow and all of a sudden you look up and 5 hours have gone by and you're like, I had other things I was gonna do today. I guess not. But you've got all these magical prints and
I was going to ask you like a really naive question at the risk of my reputation, but as I mentioned, I've never used the darkroom
yeah,
before.
no, I'm here to.
So I assume nowadays that the chemicals that are used are pretty safe. Like I know it used to be like
Yeah.
if you had too much exposure to certain film developing chemicals, it would be pretty hazardous for your health. But I think nowadays it's pretty safe, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it depends on kind of what like process you're using. And so Penumbra Foundation is a place in Manhattan where they focus on quote unquote alternative antique processes. And so
Sure.
that kind of stuff is like wet plate, like you pour the emulsion onto a sheet of metal, and like that kind of stuff is still like pretty toxic, and you definitely want to be like wearing a mask and like good gloves and have like good ventilation if you're doing that kind of stuff. But your basic black and white is like really not that bad. And there are a number of ways that you can actually like develop and print with just like basic household ingredients. You can use beer and coffee and wine, and I think maybe also various types of black tea, and you can combine them with vitamin C and a couple other things, and that's your developer. And then you can always use vinegar as stop bath. So like there are a lot of ways to do it that are really non-toxic. But your
Gotcha.
basic like developer that you're gonna get like from a black and white developing kit is not stuff you want to drink. But it's fine.
I mean, I was assuming at least that far, but I mean, like touching it with your hands and stuff like that.
Yeah, just wash your hands before you eat. Like, yeah.
Right.
It's not going to give you cancer, especially not in like small doses, you know? I mean, the other side of it is like back in the day, analog was the only way. So like newspapermen and people that worked at magazines and stuff, they were doing like 18-hour days in the darkroom 7 days a week. And so the amount of exposure that they were getting is just so much higher than anyone is going to get, at least in my darkroom. I don't
Right.
think I know anyone that's trying to spend 18 hours a day, 7 days a week in the darkroom.
Except for maybe you, right?
Right. I'm going to be the one that gets the cancer. Oh, well.
Oh no, you're probably fine, right? Well, cool. So I'd love to hear some of the lessons that you've learned, either good or bad, after running the community space like that for nearly 15 years now.
Yeah. I mean, I have moved. This is the 5th location
Oh
that I've
yes.
had for the dark room. It started out as a single occupancy thing in my basement, and then I had 2 little 400 square foot storefronts, and then I was in a 4,000 square foot warehouse for 8 years. And now I'm in a beautiful, like 1,500 square foot storefront, and it's perfect and wonderful. And yeah. So I think most of the things that I've like really learned have been like managing space and managing people and managing like expectations and like communicating with people. You know, I mean, also, I didn't like know anything about running a business when I started this, right? I didn't
Right.
like know how to build a website. I didn't know anything. So I'm still learning so much every day, especially with like marketing and social media and all the algorithms changing on me all the time. I
Oh
can't
yeah.
keep up. But it's been crazy. I painted my darkroom white this time instead of black. I've always painted them black before, and then when I was thinking about it this time, I was like, I had these shelves underneath all of the enlargers. And so they were just like these like big open shelves where people could store like boxes of paper or their backpacks or whatever. And I realized they were just black holes.
Oh,
Every time I went into the dark room, I had to like crawl like halfway in order to like get into the back of the shelf, right? Because they're like 3 feet deep or whatever to hold the enlargers. And I would always just find so much stuff just like lost in the back of the shelf. So this time I painted everything white and I installed drawers under the enlargers. So like things will hopefully not get lost and hopefully they will stay more organized and in better condition. And
I was gonna
yeah,
say that sounds like my son's bedroom.
a
He's
black
17,
hole.
so
Oh God. Yeah. I
yeah, if you
can
remember those days, like
imagine.
it's not pretty.
The boys' dorms.
Yes, exactly.
Imagine 20 of them living together.
Right, right, exactly. And then like it's not even their space, so like they probably don't quite treat it the same way as well, so it's probably even worse in some ways.
Some of them for sure. Fortunately, we did have some adults around. It wasn't just complete, like, Lord of the Flies.
Right. Gotcha. Well, I'd be curious to hear you talk a little bit about like your photography, because I know you do a lot of your own photography as well. How has running the community darkroom had an influence on how you see the craft, how you work on photography? How has it rubbed off on you?
I'm definitely doing a lot less of my own work than I was thinking I would when I first started out. But, like, that's okay because I'm still doing a fair amount. And prior to the pandemic, I was doing a really good job of doing one artist residency per year and, like, getting out of town to somewhere that was natural and not a giant city,
Hmm.
and spending, like, somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks just like focusing on taking pictures and not really worrying about doing anything else with them.
Hmm.
And then I do a lot of gum by chromate printing, so that's one of those kind of historical processes, but it's not really one of the toxic ones. You mix potassium dichromate with gum arabic and then watercolor pigment of whatever color you want, and it results in like kind of a very almost foggy, but it looks kind of like it is like kind of a watercolor painting, but
Okay.
it's a
Gotcha.
photographic print. You have to make it large format contact negative, so it's a whole like long slow process. And I start out usually with like a black and white negative, and I mostly shoot landscapes. So yeah, then I have a standard like medium format black and white negative, and then I turn it into a large contact negative, and then It takes about 24 hours to do each layer of color, and I usually do between 3 and 5 layers of color, and because that just adds like depth. And when it's sort of like painting. My dad was a painter, so he spent a lot of time when I was a kid trying to like teach us all how to like paint and draw, and I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. But I am sort of interested in that, I guess. Like, I'm interested in the aesthetic, but I don't want to actually have to like do the painting with a paintbrush, because I don't have the patience for that. But apparently I do have the patience to spend 5 days working on one print.
Right.
I can't explain it.
Hey everyone, just a quick break to tell you about the tripod that I rely on every single day, the FLM CP30 L4 II. If you've heard the phrase buy once, cry once when it comes to tripods, well, I couldn't agree more. But with this one, you actually skip the crying part altogether. The CP30 L4 II hits the sweet spot. It's lightweight enough to carry anywhere, rock solid and stable, built to last, and honestly, really well priced for the quality that you're getting. It's become my go-to for day-to-day photography, from quick local shoots to long days in the field. Perhaps what I love most about it is how tall it can get if you need it to. Perfect for those steep hillsides where you need to get the perfect composition. If you're ready to upgrade, check it out at flmcanada.com, and don't forget to use my code HouseOfPain for 10% off your entire order. All right, let's get back to this week's episode. Another thing I was hoping to ask you about, because when I was looking at your photography on your website, as you mentioned, it's mostly landscapes, got some really interesting stuff on there. And when I like compare your black and whites with the stuff I like to do black and whites, way different, right? Like I'm kind of your typical landscape guy. Like I like details and I like contrast and I like like things, usually like your subject needs to be sharp and like, those kind of traditional like thought processes that we learn about when it comes to landscape photography. And then I look at your photography and it's got more of a kind of an art gallery aesthetic. Like it's something that you would, you go to some highfalutin gallery in New York City and you're like, oh yeah, this is art, right?
I mean,
and so
I do live in New York.
I just think the
Maybe
contrast
it's just unconscious influence of the city on me. I didn't even think about that.
It could be, but I was just hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about like those differences in the aesthetics and kind of what gravitated you towards doing it the way you're doing it versus kind of more of a representational style that typically comes with landscape photography.
Yeah, I know that I like see things a certain way in my head, and this is the way that I've figured out how to like get the closest thing to that image like out of my head. And when I'm thinking about the work, I'm like, I want to take pictures that like I want to be around. I had it occurred to me a few years ago that it's okay to just try and make like beautiful images. That is actually like a worthy goal, because there's a lot of ugliness in the world, and if I can make something that like I think is beautiful, then that is hopefully going to have some sort of like impact or emotional impact on someone else as well. And I don't know, I get pretty positive feedback from my art, but I don't really sell much of it, so I don't think there's a huge like mass appeal for my aesthetic, but I like it, I guess. So
I mean, that's probably, in my opinion, the most important thing, right? Like if you like it and you enjoy doing it, that's good enough for me.
What I like see when I like am looking through my camera, and yeah, I don't know, I like messing with like depth of field and all the various things that like you can do when you're shooting film.
Well, and also, the alternative processes that you're using are going to add something else too that most of us aren't messing around with. I did a really fun podcast with a woman named Eileen Rafferty, who that's all she teaches is alternative process. And
oh, awesome.
And it's like when you start thinking about all the ways you can turn your image into the final product, it's kind of endless.
Totally.
Yeah.
And once you have, the negative, you can do like endless things with it, kind of.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. And I love the like sort of dreamy quality of the gum prints. Like I
Yeah.
just feel like it makes you look a little harder, and maybe seeing things presented in a slightly different way will help people understand the beauty that is around us that like we're losing because of climate change. And
Mm.
there's that whole side of it too. Like not only am I like creating images that I think are beautiful, but I'm documenting history in a way. Like the world is changing and we don't know where things are going to be, what things are going to look like in 10 years, never mind 50. So it's sort of about archiving.
Yeah, and it's, going back to like your style, like and how your style and my style are completely different, and neither one of them is better or worse. Like they're just different.
Yeah.
I have noticed in my time as a photographer that the style of work that you're doing, where you have kind of like an alternative process, and maybe there's like something going on with the composition that's like a little bit different. Like maybe there's a weird person in the scene, or like, I don't know. I'm thinking about this photo I saw on your website where like there's a sand dune and there's a person that's like silhouetted in
Yeah.
darkness standing
Yeah.
on the top of it. And like that would be a scene that I would typically not photograph. I'm like, get out of my photo, right? Like, get out of here. But you put them
Right.
there intentionally, right?
Right.
And I
Yeah,
have
that's
noticed
actually
that like,
I had a friend take that of me.
yeah. So like my point is like I've noticed that like that kind of photography tends to be the type of stuff that art galleries and the fine art world are more interested in, whereas like more kind of representational landscape photography is kind of like looked down upon. And I'd be curious if you had any thoughts on that from your perspective in terms of like if I'm right about that, and if I am right about that, like why is that? Like what are your thoughts on that stuff?
I mean, I don't feel like looked down on is the right way to like think about it necessarily. I think it's more like, well, if you're thinking about the New York Gallery, they often tend to kind of work as a sort of cohort, right? So what
Mm,
one gallery is showing in terms of like especially something like when you get into like niches like landscape or fashion or portraiture or whatever, oftentimes a lot of the galleries will be showing similar types of work at the same time because that's what's selling. And it's not even necessarily like anything else. Like they're just putting the shit on the wall that's selling. And I think that with more representational landscape, they think of it more as something that belongs in like National Geographic or like
mm,
a magazine. And they're
mm,
thinking of it more as like an editorial instead
mm,
of like a fine art thing. So I guess in that way there is sort of a snooty attitude, but I don't think of that as like snooty. I just think of that as like this type of work goes here for this market and that type of work goes there for that market. And they often, like rotate through too, I think. I mean, you see some strange shit in National Geographic sometimes. And oftentimes the editorial work ends up on the gallery walls too. So like
mm.
there's definitely some like motion, but yeah, I guess I would say like in my like sort of thinking and experience, the more representational stuff is considered more editorial, and the more
Mm.
artsy stuff is considered more fine art.
Yeah. I'm curious, have you seen artists and photographers who are maybe they gravitate more towards a certain style, but like you said, there's this other aesthetic that's currently doing super well and selling. Are people like kind of this is gonna sound bad, but like are people selling out to like, well, I guess I gotta do that if I want to get my stuff in the gallery, and I'm just gonna do that for a while. And then they come up with these kind of like, I don't know, like
I don't think it's
very
nearly that conscious. I don't
okay,
think it is
gotcha.
at all. There's a whole, like, I would say cohort, I don't know if that's exactly the right word, of photographers that are currently shooting for magazines like The New Yorker and sort of other like glossy editorial magazines. And I could probably think of like five or six of them. I'm not naming any names off the top of my head, but there's a good bunch of them. You know what it is they were all inspired by Daniel Arnold and his low angle, strong, harsh flash style. And so they all went out and started, whether consciously or not, replicating his style. And so you see a lot of these photographs in like current editorial publications that look very similar because there's a group of photographers that kind of all came up at the same time and were inspired by the same person. So they're all sort of, and his like technique is very simple. Like it's one camera, 35 millimeter with like a flash. Like it's a very simple technique, which is a whole other.
Well, it makes it easy to replicate, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and it's nice, you know, it gives like kind of interesting lighting. I don't know. It's very harsh. And if it's done well, it can look good. And if it's not done well, it does not look good.
You just described like all of photography.
Right. Right.
No, it's interesting because we have that in kind of the more traditional landscape photography community too. Like there's people who kind of push the envelope on doing something a little bit different. And then all of these people flock to like replicate that style, and then like there's this huge cohort of people where all of their photos look the same and you can't tell them apart at all. And I don't personally find that to be useful in terms of moving the art form forward, or and also maybe not necessarily you're not being true to yourself. Like that person exists, like let them be them, like you find out who you are is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. But also, you know, it's kind of, I think there is I think there is a certain amount of growth, right? Because I don't think like with this kind of like I'm seeing this moment happening like now, but it started like 5 or 6 years ago. Like there was a moment when all of a sudden everyone was talking about Daniel Arnold, and then like within a year, everybody was like trying to shoot like him. And it might have been the first time he shot the Met Gala. I don't know. So like, I think there are cycles, right? I think there will be like another hot photographer. When I was in school, was that the Cobra Snake? I don't even remember. He was shooting all the like party kids, and like he was doing all the ads for American Apparel that were like, you know, the little underage girls like opening their crotches and everything. Yeah. And that was all like super like clean kind of lighting, like harsh, but like not the low angles. It was different, but it was a style that was hot for a minute. Thank God it isn't anymore. And so Daniel Arnold is another one of those kind of, but not nearly as disturbing. And I think there will be others. I mean, I assume there will be. I feel like it's just something that constantly is evolving.
I feel like you live long enough in this field and you start to see those trends appear and disappear, and like, I don't know about you, but like there's a big cynical part of me where I see the people that chase it and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, just do your thing.
I don't have the energy because like by the time like I figure out how to make that work for me, like the trend is going to be over. And it'll just have been a waste of time. So I'm just going to stay over here and do my thing and be consistent, and maybe someday the world will come to me. Maybe one day I'll be the person that everybody's copying. I don't want to.
Right. You don't want to be that person, I don't think. Well, let's talk a little bit about burnout. So obviously burnout is something that pretty much every creative person I know experiences at some point, and entrepreneurs, and you happen to be both of those things. How have you navigated burnout while keeping the darkroom going?
I don't know if I have. I think I am. I think I'm managing. But I kind of feel like there's a sort of constant low level. But I try and, you know, do some physical stuff, and also try and like do some of my own art on a regular basis. I haven't been able to do any gum printing in a while, but I did like make a batch of cyanotypes a couple of weeks ago. So that was a nice physical activity. And like, yeah, making the time and space for things that aren't just buzzing at me, you know? And that's one of the reasons I like, you know, love doing landscape photography, right? Because it gives me an opportunity to just go out into trees or deserts or whatever and have quiet. and
Right.
like peace and like sort of recalibrate my nervous system. I think taking time to like get out of New York City on a regular basis is something I often find myself forgetting to do. Like
Mm.
occasionally, at least once a year, I will stay in the city for 3 months, and that's like I'll wake up one morning and I'll be like, I feel absolutely insane. And then I'll be like, when was the last time I literally just like looked at trees? And it's like, oh yeah, you have not left the city in 3 months. Like, get out and go look at a tree for an afternoon. Like,
I was gonna say that resonates a lot with me. Trying to, whenever you start to feel it, I don't know, it's hard to describe it. Like you just feel it, and like you said, you reflect back. Like, when's the last time I actually took a hike? And it's like, oh yeah,
right.
it's been a minute. I should probably do that. Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And unfortunately, I feel like not everyone has that internal kind of like thing that
Yeah.
yells at you, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
you need to go."
I mean, it took me a minute to like realize that that was like what was going on, you know? I mean, I
Mm,
remember when I first moved here, I was just feeling completely like scattered and buzzy, and then like it took me like probably a few weeks of feeling just like unhinged in some way to realize that I had not left the city in that long. And I think at that point, it might have actually even been true that I might have been in Manhattan only like for that long, because I think I was living
oh
and
yeah,
working and going to school in Manhattan. Well, I know I was doing that for a number of years, but so yeah, and it didn't like click at first, but
right,
when it clicked, it clicked. And
yeah.
now it's sort of like, oh yeah, okay. And it doesn't take me like weeks to figure out what's going on anymore. It's like, no, you're feeling buzzy because you've been in the city for this long, and this is the solution. And go take your camera and walk around in some trees for a
Yeah.
while.
So with the community darkroom, obviously you've created a really cool community. How has creating that community impacted you positively?
I mean, it's given me a community. It's given me like group of friends, a group of people that I can share like interests with and kind of like nerd out with and not worry about whether they understand the language that I'm speaking, you know?
Right.
Not everybody speaks film photography. Yeah, I mean, it's been, oh, kind of like my whole life for the last like 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
probably not like the healthiest thing, but I mean, we do all sorts of stuff, and I have people that are like teaching classes and helping me around the shop and all that kind of stuff too. So like, I'm not 100% on my own, and I used to do like movie nights and artist talks and stuff too, and
Mhm.
so I think I'm gonna start doing those again over the summer. I have a projector now, and like we have air conditioning, and our walls are built, so I think I'm gonna start trying to do that kind of stuff again. And it really like gives me a lot of satisfaction to see people enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. That's awesome. Yeah. So obviously it has positive benefits for you, positive benefits for the community that you've developed and created a space for. I feel like there's a lot of other photographers out there who are interested in building some sort of community, but don't necessarily know where to start. As someone who's done it successfully, what advice would you give someone wanting to build a local creative space like yours?
just start small and like test the waters and like talk to people about it. Every few months, someone sends me an email saying, like, how much money do I need to start your business in my place? And I'm like, that's just not the right like question to start with, you know? It's like if you actually want it to be a community space, you need to like make sure that the community is there and wants the space.
Mm,
So if you're in the actual middle of nowhere, then you might be better served by just building yourself a private darkroom and not trying to share it with anybody. But if you're in a place where there is like an artistic community of photographers or people who might be interested in film photography, then I mean, I had, I don't know, mysterious blessing of being able to set it up in a closet in the basement of my loft building. So
mhm.
people didn't even have to come into my apartment. And the loft building front door was a system where I could unlock it from my phone. So I didn't even have to be home to let people into the dark room, right? So that made it a lot easier for me to get it off the ground. So maybe somebody wants to rent like a tiny little storefront space, but like, I mean, I started it as just a single occupancy black and white thing where people could print only up to 16 by 20. They could print 35 millimeter film or medium format film, but not 4 by 5. And that was because that was what I needed. You know, that was like, I was like, what is the bare minimum that I need for myself? And like, that's what I'm starting with. And then it was also like, you know, being physically located in the middle of Bushwick, which is and was a vibrant artist community. And like, you know, I'm lucky to a certain degree, but I also, you know, made choices to like put myself in this location. I knew I wanted to be in New York from like a very young age, and I knew I wanted to be doing photography from a very young age, and I knew I didn't want to be doing like digital photography from a very young age. My high school photo teacher actually had us playing with Photoshop, and I just was never interested in that much time in front of a computer. I was like, I want to be in the darkroom. So, yeah, I mean, find a space, figure out how you're going to pay for it, and do it.
Yeah,
Build a
it's interesting.
Squarespace website. It's not that hard.
I like what you said about getting the community involved in like figuring out what they actually want and need, because you know it doesn't necessarily even have to be a physical space. You know, it could just be like
Right.
a
A
Zoom
meetup or
thing that
something.
people do, or
Yeah,
yeah, or like
totally.
a
During the
photo
pandemic,
club.
right, right. No, during the pandemic, we did a Zoom book club and we got together once a week and talked about some like random photo book thing. And that was awesome. And that was, you know, easy and it gave us that sense of community even though we were in lockdown.
Yeah.
So if you're in a remote area, just, yeah. There are a lot of meetups on meetup.org, and I don't think that's just a New York thing. I
No,
think
it's not.
that's like, yeah. I mean, I
Back
know it's not,
in
but I don't like.
Yeah, I was gonna say like in 2012, I used to lead meetups
Oh,
for
nice.
photography. Like when I lived in Colorado Springs, and we would do meetup groups, and I would lead sunrise slash astrophotography trips to the local areas and things like
Oh,
that. So yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
That sounds really cool.
yeah.
So, yeah,
So it's
go
good,
meet
good
people.
advice. Yeah.
Cool.
So you've got this community service that you're offering. I'm guessing it's not well, maybe I should ask, is it a nonprofit or is it for profit?
It's for profit, but we don't
Okay.
make a profit. It's just because like I started it as a sole proprietorship and it's never made any money and I don't want to have to deal with a board and filling out 25 pages of
Right.
incorporation documents just so I can like give up ownership. I feel like maintaining ownership also like kind of keeps it together.
Fair enough.
It seems like nonprofit boards have, you know, tend to be very dysfunctional in a lot of cases.
Yes,
So
I've
I'm
experienced
like,
that. I've been on a few.
why should I make it more complicated? You know, like
Yeah.
it's a low enough overhead that if I have, you know, the number of people that can actually fit in the space paying reasonable reasonable amount, then it's not expensive for anyone and everybody can have what they need and hopefully it all just works.
So that's kind of why I asked the question, because I wanted to ask you about your approach to pricing and keeping it inclusive without becoming unsustainable, and you know you being able to pay your rent and things like that.
Yeah, basically I, you know, kind of figured out like my like sort of cost per month per square foot and like that's kind of how I figured out my like hourly rate for like non-member hourly rental is they pay whatever like that equivalent math is. And then members get, you know, various depending on their like membership level, they get like certain like discounts, right? So you can pay $30 a month and then that gets you 24/7 access, which the public does not get. And it also gets you 20% off the hourly fee. So you still have to pay an hourly fee, but it's a 20% discounted hourly fee. And then, or you can either do that for $30 a month plus $15 to $20 an hour, depending on whatever you're using, and end up spending, usually people are spending like 100 or $150 a month on that kind of package. And then there's a $300 a month level where you can come in and have unlimited hours included. You don't have to pay the hourly fee at all. And that gets you 24/7 access. And so, and then I'm also looking at like, competitors and sort of similar business models and people that are doing similar kinds of things throughout the city. And I try and keep my prices sort of like level-ish with them on the lower side as well.
Right.
And then also, like, if people need financial aid, like, I just give it to them. Because if people, like, feel compelled to ask for financial aid, I figure that they need it. So,
Seems
I
simple
usually
enough.
just make people coupon codes for, like, 20 or 25% off for that. Yeah. What else am I
Cool.
doing? That's kind
No,
of
that
I
that
think.
answers the question. I was just, yeah, that's super curious. I like the cost per square foot per hour. I think that's a very
Right, because there's like
interesting.
certain hard costs. And it's like,
Sure.
I know I have to spend this much money in rent, this much money on like electric, this much money on the Wi-Fi. And so, like, let's tally all of that up. And then we have like this many square feet. And each physical enlarging station is like a certain number of square feet, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So that's sort of how
Makes
that works in my head.
I think it makes total sense.
Cool.
All right. So earlier, I kind of primed this on purpose, but earlier we talked a bit about galleries. And I know that you're going to be launching a class on how to get gallery representation. And I was curious to hear you talk a little bit about why you decided to create that and what can people expect from doing it.
Yeah. Right. So exhibiting has always been kind of one of the like core elements of the like business model. Even when the darkroom was in the basement, we were like putting up art on the walls in the hallway during Bushwick Open Studios and stuff. And I've been doing like pop-up shows at various locations for many years, bars and galleries around the neighborhood. And then once we finally had space for a like semi-dedicated gallery space of our own, I started doing pretty regular shows there. So part of the idea of the darkroom as it's evolved has become for it to be a place that you can learn how to use your camera, take a photo. We have like a very small studio setup, so theoretically you could like take photos, develop and print and scan the film, and then also exhibit it theoretically without leaving the space. And then over the last like several years, another thing that I've added into that roster is art fairs. So I've been doing group shows at art fairs around the country, and next week I'm actually going to Iceland
Oh,
for
cool.
the Sluice Art Fair, and I have about 20 different photos by 20 different people that are part of that show. So this whole exhibiting element has always been like core to me. And then a few years ago, Lens Culture magazine published this guide to working with galleries, and it's like 100 pages long. And I started going
Wow.
through it and realizing that it's super comprehensive. And I really wanted to like set up a program for myself, if nothing else. It's another one of those I want things. Like I wanted a program. I would like to get my photos into those snooty Chelsea gallery walls. Like I would like to sell prints for thousands of dollars to fancy rich people. That is a life goal of mine.
Fair enough.
That is something I would like to accomplish. And as I was going through this thing, I realized that it really seems like if you follow the instructions laid out in this 100-page manual, you should be able to accomplish that goal. And so I started trying to like break it down into like digestible bites and just for myself. And as I was doing that, I was like, no, like I don't actually want to do this alone, right? Like I actually think this would be a much more successful project for me and also other people if we had a group of like 4 to 10 people that were all sort of working through this project at the same time. And so I've been working on basically turning that like document into a like 6 or 8 week course, so that I, if nothing else, can do it alongside people and see how it works. I don't, maybe it's a terrible idea. Maybe we won't get any gallery representation, but it's very comprehensive on all of your written materials, your CV, your resume, your artist statement, your artist bio, what your actual physical portfolio should look like, how to do the research, how to find the galleries, how to communicate with the galleries, who to reach out to at the galleries, how to find all of those people.
Man,
So,
we could do a whole
yeah,
podcast just on that.
yeah. It's probably like a much bigger project than I'm like thinking of it as, but I want to get it started. I'm hoping to launch it at the beginning of July. Yeah, because if I don't get it started, then I'm just never going to do it. We're not in lockdown right now, and there isn't another pandemic on the horizon for who knows the moment.
Don't jinx it.
Knock on wood. So yeah, it seems like a good time. And I've been doing all of these art fairs for the last several years, and I have a bunch more of these art fairs lined up for next year and this fall and next spring. So it's like we're already helping people build their resumes and their CVs, and we're already getting them exhibition experience and like lines on their resume, but we haven't tapped into that like big lofty goal or the like formal established like art fairs, right? We're still down at like the entry level place, and that's fine. That's great. That's wonderful to be able to offer like access to those opportunities to people who haven't had it before. But now I'm developing this roster of people that have been showing with me for a number of years, and I'm like, you guys have portfolios, like I've seen them. Let's do this.
Yeah. And it occurs to me that, let's say you go through this first batch and you find a lot of success. It seems to me like you've just struck gold in terms of offering a service to people who want to be able to replicate that.
Hopefully. Yeah. And I mean, if it like actually like goes smoothly, I would love to like turn it into an online course that people could just do kind of like at their own pace, right? Because
Yeah.
if they don't feel the need to work with a group, then they can just have like the information and the videos and the like recordings that we've made from doing it in person, and then I offer it presumably like a couple of times a year for like an in-person group, and it just becomes something that keeps people progressing in their careers and like
Yeah.
making art.
And you could do it like what I'm seeing a lot of people do nowadays is like you have this kind of like this video on demand platform that's maybe like $100.
Yeah.
But it gets you close. And then,
Right.
but wait, there's more. If you sign up for our VIP program that costs $3,000, we can almost guarantee that you'll get into this gallery. Would you like to commit? I mean, I see a lot of people doing this, like kind
Yeah.
of this hook and
Yeah.
bait thing where they do this like pretty good video course that's really just like a way of selling this super
Right.
expensive product. So hopefully it's not quite that bad, but
I don't exactly like that's not really what I'm going for. Like I'm not trying to like catfish people here.
that's a
I'm
thing though.
like
It's a thing.
yeah, I believe that. And it could definitely be done with like this like model for this kind of class. Like
Oh yeah.
yeah, watch the videos online for 50 or $100 and then do it in person and whatever. But I
Yes.
mean, I don't like that's not the goal. The goal would be to charge people enough that they were actually just committed, because
Right.
it's a lot of work and it's not all fun work. And it's not all making photos. And like I don't want people who are gonna like sign up and then bail after the first like week or two or something. And it might, I think I have it down to like a 6 or 8 week schedule, but it might turn out that it would be better as like a 12-week thing. So those are the kinds of details that I'm gonna do with my like beta round, and I don't think I'm gonna charge them anything, but I might have to charge them something in order to like make sure that they'll actually come.
Yeah, show up. Yeah, for sure.
But Yeah.
That's a
But
real
I think
thing.
once I have it,
If it's free, people won't do it.
right? Yeah. So I don't, yeah. I want it to be something that people are actually taking seriously and like putting genuine energy into and not just going to ChatGPT to have their artist statements written. Like, I
Are you
want
saying
people to
that doesn't
actually
work?
like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a place to brainstorm, but maybe write your own actual artist statement. Like,
Yeah, right. Totally. It's funny. Maybe 4 months ago or so, I took this course. It was like all about learning how to do advertising on Facebook.
ugh,
And I was like, and I know I hate it, but like
hate.
I run this photography competition and like we need to do advertising on
Yeah,
Facebook sometimes.
totally.
And so I was like, man, okay, I'm gonna spend $100 or whatever. I'm probably, maybe it'll be good. And I went through the course and it was actually decent, good information. But of course, like they leave you hanging at the end. Like if you go through all these steps and you're almost there. And then so then you
Right.
email them and it's like, oh, you can join our VIP program. And it's
This
like
is our elite category.
$8,000. I'm like, you guys are kidding me. Come on.
But people are paying that?
Oh, for sure.
Like,
Absolutely.
presumably they wouldn't be doing that if people weren't paying that.
Oh yeah, they were for sure. Yeah, yeah, and
Wow.
of course they have all the hallmarks. Like, oh, we only have a couple slots left. Our next cohort starts
48
next
hours.
week, and like, actually, I could, you seem really nice. I can maybe knock the price down to 7,500. Like they know the psychology of selling something like that, and
Yeah.
like it's gross to me. Like I hate that
Yeah.
stuff.
No.
I don't know.
It's
I don't know if you've ever
so, like,
been through something like that, but it's
I feel like I've
yeah.
seen those programs and like the way that you're like describing these like sales tactics, like, yeah, I know I've seen that around. And like it's a recipe and
Oh, it's
I
for
guess
sure
it
a recipe.
works. Like it's just weird to be able to see that you're being manipulated.
Anyway, I
Spot the
just thought
red
that was a
flags.
funny little aside. Yeah. Well, cool. I have only a couple more questions for you.
Cool.
So, as you probably know, many of my listeners are nature and landscape photographers. How do you think that those individuals can incorporate more hands-on, analog, or community-focused aspects into their work?
I think that's kind of like what I do, right? Because I shoot landscapes on film. So
Yeah.
I take my like shooting time as my like alone time, basically. And that's, I go out by myself. But thinking back on that meetup note, I'm sure you were leading those groups. So I'm sure there are groups like that everywhere. So I would just say, bring a film camera, right? Like just
Hmm.
if you don't shoot film already, you can start out with a disposable camera. Those things have 35 millimeter film in them, just like any other SLR, It doesn't need to be fancy. I think just, getting out and playing with it. And then if you're in a place where there is a community lab or a community darkroom or something, just go knock on the door or shoot them an email. And most of the time, in my experience, they're very happy to let you in the door. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like their whole thing. So,
Awesome.
yeah,
Good
go get
deal.
some film and take
Get
some
some
pictures.
film. You have a favorite entry-level film camera that you recommend?
You know, the Pentax K1000 is a really good one. It's very like mechanical and simple and virtually indestructible.
That's really good for landscapes.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, you heard it here. K1000. All right. So what's next for the community darkroom? What do you have coming up, and how can people get involved or support what you're doing? Either people who live in New York City or people living afar.
Let's see. So I'm bringing this show to Iceland at the
All right.
end of May. So if you're in Iceland, come see the show. um, I cannot for the life of me pronounce the name of the town, but it's up on the like northeastern corner, and it would just be
Oh,
mortifying for me to try and pronounce it. It's an SJO word.
yes. I know which town you're talking about, I think.
Oh, really? Apparently, it's like actually kind of an art like mecca, and it
It's
sounds like
got
it's going to be
a,
a really cool fair.
if it's the same town I'm thinking of, it has this sidewalk that's like a rainbow that goes into a church.
Oh, I don't know. I've got to
Yeah,
do
and I
some.
can never pronounce it either.
I I hope so. That would be awesome. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, other than that, people can mail us their film for developing from anywhere in the country. And if they're in the local area, we have all sorts of events and workshops and fun things coming up over the summer. And everybody should just go to our website and see if there's something there that catches their eye, because I'm always trying to add, opportunities and resources, and also share things that I find from around the internet. The Midwest Center for Photography seems to do a whole lot of open calls, so I always kind of try and pump those out to my network too. So that kind of stuff is there too. But yeah.
So if someone's traveling to New York City, they now have two places they have to visit if they're photographers. They have to go to B&H and they have to go to the Community Darkroom.
Yes. Love it.
Awesome.
Definitely.
All right. So last question, who do you recommend our listeners learn more about?
Oh, yeah. So two photographers that I think are really great that I do know personally, but they're some shooting film, some not, but doing really nice editorial work are OK McCausland and Peter Fisher. They're both really good people too. And then my friend Lacey Weathersby runs an amazing high-end digital printing lab down in the Gowanus neighborhood of Brooklyn. And she's a wonderful, joyous photographer person and, fellow small business owner. So I'd love to plug her business because she does stuff that I don't do. They have this crazy UV printer and I'm just okay. I don't know what to do with that.
Right, I'm going to go to the darkroom. I'll see you later.
Right, exactly. But they're all people that I met through the darkroom too over the last 10 years. So yeah, it's been great. I've been introduced to some really wonderful, genuine, creative, talented humans.
Love it. Well, Lucia, this has been super fun.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Of course. Well, thanks for joining me for another fun episode. Huge thanks to Lucia Rollow for sharing her passion for analog photography, real-world community, and the lessons that she's learned from nearly 15 years of running the Bushwick Community Darkroom. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to help keep the podcast alive, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. It's truly listener support that keeps these conversations coming week in and week out. And hey, if you're thinking about upgrading your gear, remember, I trust FLM tripods and ball heads, hands down, the best in the industry for stability and build quality. You can get 10% off your entire order at flmcanada.com and use the code House of Pain at checkout. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.